Welcome to the first ever episode of Hoops Your Daddy, the first ever basketball podcast here at Guerilla Sports. I am Liv Moods, joined by...
My name's Ruben Villalobos.
And my name's Brandon Krisztal.
We are super excited to get this going. Obviously, we now know the Nuggets in the first round of the playoffs will be facing the Lakers. Hoops your daddy. Who's your daddy? We know how this is going to go. The Lakers last season, obviously, we saw them in the Western Conference Finals. The Nuggets did anyways, and we swept. But for now, I think we should start with an open of our prediction for this series. I've seen a lot of people all over Twitter talking about, do they see a sweep again? Is it going to be a gentleman's sweep? I will start by saying I think we get Nuggets in 6. That is my prediction. I think it's a little bit more competitive than last year. We can jump into why we all think that. But Ruben, what says you? How do you feel about this series this season?
I feel phenomenal, mostly because there's such continuity going with the Nuggets. I feel like the Nuggets are going to they might take this one in 5 games. I really do think so. It's going to be competitive again, but just the continuity aspect of this team being together so long is going to definitely determine that series to be over in 5.
BK.
Yeah, I'm right there. I think it's 5 games,
Cool.
maybe max, and it's not because LeBron's not a great player, and Anthony Davis making it through 76 games is kind of a minor miracle in and of itself. But the drop-off and watching them against the Pelicans in that play-in game, you're just reminded, and you go into the numbers, like, oh, well, D'Angelo Russell's their 3rd leading scorer. Mm-hmm. We know what Austin Reeves is capable of, bursts. But I just don't think they have enough offensively or defensively to come anywhere close to winning the series. And I think even pushing it to 6 games is going to be probably because either LeBron puts on a cape that we haven't seen, or Anthony Davis goes for 50 in a win, and or there's an injury that affects it one way or the other, and we certainly don't want to jinx anyone. But if it goes past 5, I'll be surprised.
And BK, you've been doing a lot of coverage of Denver sports for quite some time as the lead sports reporter for KOA. You were actually at a Nuggets practice this week ahead of the playoffs. What was your feeling leaving practice? What are some of the biggest takeaways that you found being there?
Well, and I asked Nikola Jokic this, and it was funny, right, because it was as crowded as we've seen there maybe since the very first regular season practice. It wasn't the first regular season practice, but maybe right before the opener where we knew Banner Night was coming all the way back in October. That was pretty crowded, but it hasn't been this crowded since last year during the playoffs, just at a practice in the middle of the week.
Right.
But they've had a couple of days off. We know their opponent. And so I asked Joker this. What I was, I guess, getting to was there weren't as many questions thrown at these guys as I would have thought. Like,
right.
There were a lot of pauses where you're like, is this thing about to end? So I found myself asking 3 or 4 questions to, on this day, Coach, Joker, Peyton Watson. But I asked Joker, and I didn't get to circle back around to this with Coach because I ended up throwing in a Michael Porter question that we'll get to later about his brothers. But I asked Joker, I said, I don't want to use the word relax. And he didn't want to use the word relax.
Right.
But I guess the word that we never got to was like a comfort level because they got the monkey off their back and the pressure of winning a championship. This is a different team from a year ago. They're going to rely on some young players a lot more. Mm-hmm. They probably aren't as deep as they were last year in terms of guys that will play real minutes in the playoffs. You'll ask yourself, how much do you trust guys like Reggie Jackson? Can you play DeAndre Jordan much? Zeke Naji? But so Joker, without saying it, said, look, we're not taking anything easy. We're not relaxed, but that we know what we're doing. We've been there before.
For sure. 8 times, to be exact.
And so I think if you asked Michael Malone that same question, he's never relaxed. But just the confidence that comes with, all right, we know what we're doing. We've gone through this, and we know what it takes to hopefully do it again for them.
Yeah, I think that's been kind of the thing that I've been seeing on Twitter, X, whatever it's called. I can't keep up anymore, honestly. But a lot of Lakers fans feel like this is a very different team. We are not going to be swept again. And I could agree with that. I think that this is a little bit more of a competitive team. They will definitely have fresher legs this time around. There's a little bit of that revenge aspect sprinkled in there. Ruben, do you foresee Lakers fans being silenced relatively quickly after game 1? We know that the Nuggets defend home court very, very well in the postseason and also in the regular season. But do you think that Lakers fans at this point in time, because I'm getting ready to troll Lakers fans here in just a minute, but I'd like to maybe start off a little bit easy on them. Do you feel like they're a little overconfident right now going into this series after 1 game against the 7 seed?
Let's get one thing clear. Lakers fans they're rambunctious. And
They're the loudest people on Twitter.
I mean, they're always going to be confident, obviously,
sure.
because of their historical,
Yes.
presence in the NBA. But, given the even when at the beginning of the season when the Lakers had all these different acquisitions, throughout free agency, the team is better. So I can see where they're coming from, where they do expect a much tighter series, just like us Nuggets fans, because both of these teams are relatively the same, but also a little bit different in their own aspects. They still have the same core from each particular team, but they've added different pieces, and the Nuggets are relying more on youth. But I don't know. I can see where they're coming from, but in a weird way, they're also slightly delusional in the fact that they're
Not slightly, super.
Yeah,
Yes.
that it's gonna be a longer series, and I just don't foresee that. And the stats prove it, but also the confidence level in the Nuggets is gonna definitely affect them once that game. I mean, if the Nuggets do it like they did last year, where they blew out the Lakers in Game 1, it's gonna set in a lot of extra doubt in the Lakers,
For sure.
because now it's gonna be 9 in a row, and
The series is mental
Yeah.
as just as much as it is physical. I think that if the
Yeah.
Nuggets can set the tone early, there's probably going to be some like PTSD flashbacks that the Lakers begin to have, because
Yeah.
they've seen this before and they do not want the Nuggets to start off hot at home.
The first Sombor shot that Jokic hits in the series, AD is gonna start tweaking out a little bit,
Right.
But no, I can see this being one of those series where it's gonna be incredibly entertaining, and because there's so much extra eyes on it now, because it is a rematch, there is gonna be that level of like extra intensity from both teams. Like you said, it's going to be a little bit of a revenge factor. I'm not so sure about fresher legs this time, because if you do think about it, the Lakers did have to really, after the All-Star break, they had to push themselves quite a lot to get themselves. I mean, at one point they were number
That's fair.
6.
Yeah,
they
had
were
to
number 6.
climb up.
So they did have to climb up, not to get upper in the standings, but not to drop at number 9 or even
Right.
top out of the plan. So they did have to play a lot of tough basketball, especially down the stretch, given the fact that they were in that 9th seed,
Right.
and luckily enough they ended up in the 7th seed. But no, they're still going to be a little bit tired, and AD coming off a bit of an injury with, I guess he had some
lower
back,
back,
something like that.
Yeah, and
So-
I think it was back spasms, perhaps.
and then also LeBron's age, like
Yeah,
he played a lot of basketball this year as well.
He's
so-
played a lot of basketball this year. He's played more
Yeah.
competitive basketball than anyone that's ever walked the planet.
Yeah.
When you talk about all those runs to the finals
Right.
and jumping into the pros as an 18-year-old and so many deep
Yeah.
playoff runs, I think forever Kobe probably had that title, and maybe Manu Ginobili because he's playing pro ball since he was 16, but those seasons weren't as long.
Yeah.
And then you get to the pros, and it's all this plus Olympics for those guys. And the idea that LeBron's also going to play in the Olympics again is a credit to him. And
Good for
And
him,
maybe it's
yeah.
because in the back of his mind, he knows that his playoff run won't be as long as others have been. But I just look at the way the Nuggets were able to close out those most recent games against the Lakers. You were right about how they're playing. And I hadn't tracked this until Michael Malone said it, but they're 12-3 in their last 15. So they're playing their best basketball when it counts.
Yep, they've got momentum at the right time.
I just
for
think
sure.
they're limited, and you add Spencer Dinwiddie, he can barely get on the court. You're relying on Gabe Vincent, who you obviously gave a nice contract to. Taurean Prince is barely playing. Hachimura, or he's been banged up. Hachimura, you kind of know what you have, know what he is and what he isn't. I don't think they have enough firepower, unless you were going to get superhuman performances from LeBron and AD every game together, and it's just unrealistic at this point.
I think that, again, we can remove our bias for a little bit here as Nuggets fans, and I do think that there's obviously some credit to give. You were at practice. Malone kind of
and I should
insinuated
qualify,
the same thing.
I don't call myself, other than Kansas football, a little in Kansas basketball, my fanship is, I grew up in Dallas and liked those teams. My Mavericks fanship has waned. I like the Nuggets. I like the Avs. I don't lose sleep when they don't win.
Yeah.
It's good when the Broncos win. I think the Cowboys are kind of a disaster at times, even though they win a lot of regular season games. I'll yell at the TV, but I just want to qualify. Unlike you two, who grew up here and
I
love
will
the Nuggets.
lose sleep, by the way.
And look, my kids are Nuggets fans, they're Broncos fans. They love their teams in town, and I bought more gear for all of those teams. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm cheering against them, or we've got people we know that are in town that grew up here, born and raised, but love the Lakers. Or now the Warriors have certainly curried favor, no pun intended. So you guys are Nuggets fans. It's fun.
I am.
It's fun to cover parades. They do things the right way. Nikola Jokic is an easy player to cheer for as a fan of the sport, and to see more people, arrive at that is cool. But so I didn't mean to cut off your point.
No.
But I just want to qualify. I don't rock Nuggets gear very often.
Well, I do. So, and I will lose sleep over a loss, but I am able to remove myself from the fandom of it all and be able to give credit where it's due, give flowers. And I will tell you probably my biggest concern, and I called these Nuggets X factors. Like, what do the Nuggets really need to focus on in this upcoming series against the Lakers? I have two. The first one being the bench. The second one being the second half. And what I'm going to tell you about, you mentioned that the Lakers kind of have the momentum at the right time. The Lakers on paper are what you could consider the clutchest team in the regular season because they are 24-9 in games that are within 5 points with 5 minutes left. Now, the reason I bring that up is because the Nuggets sometimes do the exact opposite. We've seen this in games where the Nuggets have the lead, they take their foot off the gas, they start to kind of play it safe, whether that's in how they rotate players, who comes off the bench, Jokic minutes versus non-Jokic minutes, whatever that may be. We have seen before a lead by the Nuggets get lost in the second half and or the fourth quarter. So for me, I would say that the closing out of each of these games throughout this series are going to be very, very important, given what I just told you about the Lakers being 24-9 when there's a 5-point deficit with 5 minutes left. They know how to close out a game. That's what that means. So, Ruben, I'll start with you. Does that concern you at all? Because we have seen it. We just saw it with the Spurs where that was a game where, hell, I almost turned the TV off and went and ran errands.
I did. They were up 23.
Honestly,
I
was like, okay, cool. I can go run errands. I can go do whatever I need to do. We've got this. We're good. Number 1 seed is ours. And before you know it, it's not. So is that something at all that you're concerned about with the Nuggets?
Not in the playoffs.
Okay.
Absolutely not. And I say this because we've already seen this Nuggets team from previous years grow into their mature self, which is like their best self is in the playoffs, and we've seen that jump from not only statistical but as a team that unifies in the playoffs. I don't necessarily see it as an issue. It is something to maybe keep an eye on.
Yeah.
But given the mentality of this team, of like, this team is a veteran team. Let's not forget, like, this is no young kids on the block anymore. They're coming off a championship. They know who they are. So for me, it's not necessarily the second half or anything like that, because we know that the Nuggets are going to be locked in for every playoff game, and we saw it last year.
Yeah.
There was really no.
They were very dialed in.
There was no really downturn on. I mean, there's obviously every team in the playoffs does like runs here and there, but it wasn't anything that was like drastic to the point where, like the Spurs game, where we're like, oh my God, what are they doing?
Right.
I feel like that's more of like they've kind of learned their mistake, and against the Spurs, they really did learn that mistake. Like, why did we flop this game? And you can tell that they were very visibly upset after that Spurs game, because they did let it go. But I just don't see that happening in the playoffs, mostly because of, one, Jamal Murray's a dog. He's not going to let this team get to that point. And also, Nikola Jokic just controls the game so much. It's just one of the things where it's going to become an afterthought. The one thing I am concerned about is rebounding. Offensive,
and that's where,
started.
But that's also where your depth will be an issue, because the guys you're relying on off the bench are Peyton Watson, who's kind of a do everything, but he's not going to go get you 12 rebounds.
Yeah. Right.
Christian Brown, similar, and then I guess Reggie Jackson, right? And
I was just going to ask you, BK, how you feel. That's my other X factor, is the bench.
The bench is a concern because you don't even really trust Reggie Jackson right now. There were stretches, especially early in the year when Jamal was hurt, that you thought, okay, Reggie Jackson's exactly what we thought. Yes, he's in his mid-30s, but he understands how to play the game. He understands his role in place of Jamal, certainly when Jamal's there, and how he's supposed to operate as the backup point guard. But even when Jamal's been out, you early were like, okay, they're going to be fine, because look, they've got everybody else around him, and his veteran presence will also help that second unit. And you realize quickly that you saw Malone go from Jamal in the second unit to Joker in the second unit.
Right.
And Jamal and or Reggie with the starters. You did kind of, I don't say steal my thunder, but that's the number one reason I'm not worried about them in a clutch situation. I understand that Jamal was on the court against the Spurs, but if you were to go through the games where they let their foot off the gas, especially in the last month, give or take, how many of those games was Jamal Murray absent for?
Right.
Because in the playoffs and in crunch time, he's as good a closer as there is in the league, along with
I'll get
Joker, who
goosebumps
might
just
be
thinking about it.
Joker might be the best closer in the league, and then their ability to play off each other. I'm not worried about that at all, even though of late their clutch metrics may not be great. Malone did bring up that as well after Wednesday's practice, that they're one of the best clutch teams in the league because they do know what they need to do, and you look at the way they close out those Lakers games. But as talented as Peyton Watson is and as exciting as he seems to be in terms of watching his talent just grow or watching him grow into his talent as a pro, and Christian Brown now operating as your backup point guard at times, you feel good about what you're going to get from them.
Totally.
It's what are we getting from Reggie Jackson on a given night? If they end up against Minnesota in round 2, you're going to need minutes from DeAndre Jordan. They're just too big.
Right.
And you're paying Zeke Naji $32 million. Can you steal any minutes? Can you trust him at all? I would be reluctant to. And after that, I don't think you're playing anyone anyway. So it's a 100-year-old DeAndre Jordan who tells us he's not old, but he's 35 and he played a lot of basketball. And
For sure.
You'll see spurts, but the idea that he's going to be a part of 16 wins and 20 playoff games or whatever that ends up being seems unlikely.
So one thing that I saw from the Lakers game when they played the Pelicans was just they were living and dying by the three, which fair. If you can make them, you may as well. So there's a name we have not mentioned coming off of the bench yet that I think could be a sneaky little spark to that offense when you have the rotation of Jokic versus non-Jokic minutes or Jamal needs some rest. And that's Mr. Holiday. Mr. Holiday with a corner 3 can really regain and or keep momentum for this Nuggets team. Now, is Holiday a player that I trust with my entire life? Absolutely not. But that is one guy off of the bench that I can see it. I can picture it right now, that corner 3 that he is so good at. If one of those lands at the right time, to me, that could be a really pivotal moment offensively when our bench is playing and getting more minutes. So that's a player that I actually wrote down as like okay, that's a sneaky guy. Now, again, not somebody that I trust fully, but in the right moment, again, watching the Lakers-Pelicans, it was 3 balls flying like crazy, and the Lakers didn't really seem to have much priority on perimeter defense. So,
I think they were so worried about Zion.
Right. So if the Lakers are smart, they'll worry about Jokic, so the perimeter should not be their priority. If you can get a guy like Holiday that can come in and have those again, if the bench players can have their minutes be crucial, treat them crucial regardless of the score, either maintain the score so we don't have to worry about the foot coming off the gas type of thing against a clutch team like the Lakers. But yeah, Holiday's an interesting one where I kind of am like, okay, he might have some big moments for us in this series.
Justin Holiday could end up being like that replacement bench player in case Peyton Watson's not having a good game. Or even Reggie Jackson. He's just kind of like that extra piece that can kind of go in and kind of fill in a couple of roles here and there.
And you look at a guy that's been in the league for over a decade, right? And you know what he is and you know what he isn't. You're probably not in a hurry to start him for 20 games, on the wing. But you saw even throughout the year in spot start duty, you're like, okay, this is why this guy's been on rosters forever and is trusted by all the coaches he's played for. And unlike, say, Reggie Jackson, I don't think he's going to take bad shots that might hurt your team.
Right.
And so I think that maybe as we're worried about the Nuggets' depth, that's something that Michael Malone and his staff are not because they know that they are going to rely on Justin Holiday a little more in the playoffs.
Right.
And they just didn't need to. I think you probably would have liked to have seen a few more minutes just down the stretch in the final week and a half, 2 weeks of those handful of games. But it's a card that you have in your pocket that you may be quicker to play, especially against a Lakers team that isn't that big. Play Justin Holiday before you even look at Zeke Naji.
Yeah.
So between the bench and the rebounding that hopefully we don't have to worry about, I'll tell you right now, a player for me with the Nuggets that has just looked off is Aaron Gordon. That is usually a guy that on any given night I can take the over on his rebounds prop and feel pretty stinking good about it. I think.
I don't know, in the playoffs, I feel like I lost on that more than I did.
Okay, yeah.
Because it'd be like 8.5 and he'd have 7.
Yeah, well, now you can probably, hopefully now, because of the way he's been rebounding as of late, his numbers may be a little lower, so maybe you can get it and you can make some money there. But I think what I started to see with AG, I went to the Timberwolves game really off game for him. Like it just was not, he was not himself. But I do think that it is worth saying that AG's game is very physical. He will go body to body with just about anybody in the league. And so I think there's probably a level to AG towards the tail end of the regular season that was a little banged up. So I'm hoping that in this little bit of time off, he was able to rest. I know that I saw in pregame he had like the cupping bruises with his shoulder. So again, he plays a very aggressive and physical game.
Yep.
I really hope we see that again. And then I think maybe the problem with the rebounding can be something that I think part of the reason that rebounding has been so stressful lately is we haven't seen AG in his best, most aggressive form.
And
so,
and like you said, he has been banged up like quite a lot. I mean,
oh yeah,
the dude takes on the defensive assignments of not just like their best player, but like their best big at times. Like,
oh yeah,
and they're trying to cheat and make him your backup center because you're relying on these other young guys. But you know he's going to draw LeBron out of the gate. Maybe they're going to throw KCP at him a little and MPJ some. I do think what we saw last year in the playoffs, even though he's clearly shooting better, Michael Porter Jr., when he wasn't finding his shot last year, and we know that maybe some of the off-court stuff was a part of that, his rebounding kept him
that was
in
my favorite
games.
prop last year during the playoffs was his rebounding prop.
And so if they won 16 games, they only lost, 2? It had to hit more than it didn't, I would think.
For
even
sure.
as it was going up, he was
For
still
sure.
dropping in double-digit rebounds, and I don't think he was ever, the over-under was never 10.5. It was always right between that 6-8, in that window.
Yeah.
And so if you can get that, you're probably going to get a little bit more rebounding from guys like KCP and Jamal Murray than you get night in, night out, just because of the nature of the playoffs, right? It's not that you don't want to run and you don't want to get going in transition. Transition defense is something you need to be worried about, and that's something that something Michael Malone brought up. Because transition defense, even though you know it's coming, you can't run a defense to stop. You can't call anything. It's effort, timing, a little bit of luck based on where they're going. Being able to crash the defensive glass or your offensive glass and not allow them to get out and get going on, a secondary break or whatever, that's maybe a concern where you just don't have the rebounding production that you've had. But maybe AG has also just been biding his time. It's also why I think getting through this series more than any of the others, but certainly this series is important because AG is a vet and has played a lot of basketball. Jamal Murray dealing with what he's been dealing with physically with his legs. KCP kind of the same thing, especially the hamstring in the middle of the year. And Joker just never missing a game and fighting through all of the banging and everything else that comes with being Joker. Getting them as much rest in between series is really important. And so I think that helped them in the finals. And I think if they can get out of this Lakers series quickly, 4 games, 5 games, then you're going to get – because I think that the Dallas and the Clippers series could go 5 or 6 or 7 almost certainly. I wouldn't be surprised if the Kings give the Thunder all they can handle.
Even Timberwolves Suns.
And then Timberwolves Suns. I mean, Kevin Durant's out there. So's Devin Booker. But mostly Kevin Durant. If he puts on his cape, that's going to be a 6 or 7 series, 7-game series.
Yeah, I agree. So you mentioned, so all in all, I think we talked about the X factors here being the bench, sneaky little play, Justin Holiday maybe coming off the bench and making some noise.
Yeah, I don't want to touch his props just yet.
Definitely
unless
not.
It's over under a half of something.
Yeah, don't touch the props yet.
Half of a rebound. Sure.
Second half, we've got the closer in Jamal and Jokic, so we've talked ourselves out of that type of stress. Rebounding was your stress, I think, with AG and MPJ as a combination there. We saw an MPJ last season that struggled with his signature three-point shot. I mean, that when he started in this league, that was his shot, and we were really struggling to see it fall last season. But I think we kind of chatted a little bit before we started the show about MPJ and the situation he was put in last season with his brother, getting into a car accident and getting into some trouble. And now we are worried about the sentencing for that brother happening this week ahead of
the day before
the playoffs begin against the Lakers, and his other brother being banned from the NBA for life. A lot of different things happening for MPJ behind closed doors, and I know that, BK, you mentioned speaking with Malone a little bit about this at practice. I definitely have a little bit of a worry just because these athletes are human beings, and I'm the oldest of 4. If anything happened to my siblings, it'd be hard for me to focus. Yeah. That's just the reality of the fact that these athletes are not robots with no emotions. They're human beings. So is there concern for you, BK, about how this will affect MPJ's game, and what did Malone have to say about all of it?
Yeah, I think just the human nature aspect of it, right? because his brother Jonte is kicked out of the league, that's disappointing. I don't know what criminal action, if any, will transpire. There's also a million other leagues he could go play basketball in. Like, his life isn't altered to the level of his brother Coben, who was found guilty in February. I did see something as it was brought up to me that the sentencing was this week, that the max he'll get is 8 years. But, even 8 days is going to be too much for some people. And so the fact that MPJ was able to play 81 games knowing that this was going on throughout the year, his brother's trial, and then since February, he's been sitting there waiting to be sentenced, and now he's going to be sentenced on the eve of the playoffs, has to weigh on him. Plus, it's not like the stuff with his brother, even though he played when they played in Toronto, just happened overnight. It's been building, right? That rumor's been out there a couple of weeks. And so he's been able to compartmentalize.
And I'm sure Jonte knew what was coming before we did.
Yeah,
I imagine there were conversations and meetings and
this wasn't maybe a surprise to him. And banned for life sometimes does mean banned for life, and sometimes it's indefinite, and who knows if there's a rehab process for him to get back into the league in a couple of years. That'll be between he and Adam Silver. But it's just crazy when you think about the $200 million contract that MPJ has, that his younger brother wasn't smart enough to take an Uber, and it cost someone their life and cost him, essentially his life as well. Yeah. And then his other brother, who's making even a minimum NBA salary, is close to $1 million, if I'm not mistaken, that he needs to be caught up in.
You don't need those overs and unders.
You just don't, but we understand people have problems. So because Michael Malone talked about MPJ, someone had asked about the 81 games, which is a credit to him considering how injured he was. And then I followed up with, because at that point no one had asked about just does he have an extra conversation on the side with MPJ, and he says no, he knows we're here for him. He has a great family, great support with his parents, his other siblings, and then he has a second family here. And they've already shown that support for him, but it did have all of us questioning last year, is this affecting, that's why his shot's not going down, although he wasn't shooting over the backboard, right? Those were all makeable looks that
absolutely
that
they looked good.
Yeah, they weren't bad shots, and it was funny listening to him talk about it at the end of the year, and then even at the start of this year, he's like, I'll be fine. We'll see about being not that he didn't want to be the defensive guy and the rebounding guy, but he knows he's a scorer. So because he's proven that he can still contribute, I think that we'll see him play through this, and because he knew what was going to happen for his brother, and that's going to be tough, the younger one that's dealing with the criminal issue and the sentencing. But it wasn't that he's going to be found guilty. It's more just, okay, now 8 years is the max. What does he get? Maybe
he's prepared himself.
Yeah, I think that. And the thing with Jonte is just, it's unfortunate.
Very.
But I don't know if that affects his game to the point where he's going to start shooting as poorly as he did last year.
I think it'll be just more of a press distraction, like whenever
he's
been leading up to, especially up to Friday. I think it'll just be like a talking point.
And if he plays poorly Saturday, maybe gets brought up during the game.
Yeah, and I think that's probably going to be up to the extent. But
he's also not talking. I was told he's not going to talk until Saturday after the game. They're just going to let him process. It's not
and that's fair.
It's not he's not talking, but I should clarify the way the Nuggets handle media. Coach will talk almost every day after a practice, and usually it's just a couple players. If, say, typically a print reporter is doing a story on Justin Holiday and his brothers, right, or whatever, they'll get Justin Holiday to the side. We won't all then go talk to Justin Holiday. Or even a TV reporter that's Reggie Jackson in his hometown in the spring, they'll get Reggie to the side.
So MPJ's off limits until after Saturday.
But to say that he's off limits, you can request him, they'll say, no, we're not going to make him available. That's my understanding. I guess nothing's set in stone. But they have other players. We're going to talk to KCP and CB and Jamal and Aaron Gordon. And then that's kind of just following the pattern that they have used forever. This isn't a new thing, but it's let him just process this stuff. And the deal Friday with his brother is going to be, I think, a lot heavier than the thing with Jonte dealing with Coben's sentencing. And so I don't think anybody faults it, because he then has to be made available after the game. So Saturday, and maybe he goes for 30 and 15 and hits 7 threes. Who knows?
That'd be awesome.
Saturday, I think, will be very telling across the board on how this series will evolve, what we can expect from each starter on the Nuggets, and kind of what their role is and what they're prioritizing. Let's talk about the other side of the ball for just a little bit, which is the Lakers. Obviously, that is who the Nuggets will be playing in for round one of this playoffs this season. I wanted to ask you two, because to me, I know we talked about the Nuggets X factor a little bit. I would say my X factor for the Lakers is a guy that goes by the name of Gabe Vincent. To me, now listen, offensively, not overly concerned or worried about what he's going to do, the type of damage. But defensively, I really liked what I saw from him against the Pelicans. He was pretty impactful in terms of perimeter defense. And to me, I would imagine he is the guy that will be put on Jamal Murray. I'm not saying that he is capable of stopping Jamal Murray because we know Jamal Murray is just a different breed. But I do think that he could slow down Jamal Murray a little bit until Jamal has figured out how to navigate Gabe Vincent. We could see in the first couple of games Gabe maybe slowing down Jamal a little bit. Do you think that Gabe is going to be impactful for the Lakers in this series?
I don't know if it'll be if Gabe will be like a factor defensively to the point where he's creating like havoc. I see him more of like an offensive threat because he's a great shooter. But he's also sneakily fast, and the Nuggets have had, in this Jokic era, they've had trouble with quick guards. Keep staying in front of him and just making sure that they're not getting beat off the dribble. So that's the only kind of way I see Gabe Vincent being effective is getting those open threes and the Nuggets just forgetting about him because he does play that very free roam style. I don't know. Jamal Murray's just one of those players that he probes throughout the game, and he's just kind of so cerebral. He's always so cool, and once he figures you out, like you're kind of cooked.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like Jokic. He's like, yeah, you can throw something at him, and maybe it'll stop him for maybe 2, 3, 4 possessions, but all of a sudden you get a DHO or you start you start doing all these off ball screens and stuff like that to kind of allow Murray to kind of get off of Gabe but I just don't see Gabe being that crazy X factor. The one person I kind of do see becoming a little bit of an issue is Austin Reeves, and I only say that because he is very streaky, and he's a good facilitator. People kind of forget that he does also have a really smooth handle. And he's sneakily good. I mean, last year he averaged in the Nuggets playoffs. He averaged about 15 a game.
He was important for them last year.
So he was very important for them. That's going to be my one X factor because he's already kind of integrated himself very well into the Lakers offense. They trust him on that team, and they trust him to take the shots. And he's also improved defensively. He does very well rotations, and he understands how LeBron plays as well as AD. So him and AD have a really good relationship where you saw it again with the Pelicans game where he was just kind of throwing up some alley-oops. So he does have that nice little rhythm with LeBron and AD. So that's going to be a little bit more of who I'm going to be keeping an eye on.
Okay, who's your X factor, BK, on the Lakers?
I think it's D'Angelo Russell.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Only because we know what his talent is. And maybe similar to Aaron Gordon to some degree. I mean, they're different players, right? A super high draft pick where it doesn't work out. I realize he's back with the Lakers, but he was immature, and I'm not saying AG was immature, but AG's drafted 4th to lift the Magic franchise, and he just couldn't really do that. The role he's in now is clearly perfect for him.
For sure.
Right? And we thought that it just took Jamal and MPJ getting healthy to understand that AG is the 4th option, one of your top defensive options, but as a 4th option as a scorer, especially when he gets mismatches, he's just going to destroy smaller players down low like we saw so many times, especially in the playoffs last year. But D'Angelo Russell, he was an all-star, right? 1 year in Brooklyn, if I'm not mistaken. And so he's bounced around, but he has that ability to play like an all-star.
Yep.
And I think he's a head case and takes some terrible shots and all of that. And so Darvin Ham, as well as, I guess, LeBron, have to keep him in check. And he was a non-factor throughout much of the playoffs last year. But he's obviously, as their 3rd leading scorer, more involved and I think understands what the team needs from him and doesn't.
Yep.
And some guys get it and some guys never do, right? Jordan Poole left the Warriors and has turned into a worse player. And you're like, okay, this is who Jordan Poole really is. And it was clearly addition by subtraction there for Golden State. Well, D'Angelo, I think, is kind of cut from that same cloth. And I put even J.R. Smith into that role to some degree, or, that same category where, this guy's talent's off the charts. Yeah. But we can't always trust him. We can, Jared's part of championship caliber teams and championship team with the Cavaliers and LeBron. But so Russell's the one that kind of scares me because you go back to what the Nuggets do defensively. Jamal, because of what he's asked to do and relies so much, the offense relies on his offensive contributions. He's your weakest link in terms of we thought it was MPJ, but because of his length, his ability to affect shots and hit the glass, Jamal is your weakest link, and I'm putting that in quotes, on the defensive side of the ball for your starters and guys that are going to close out. And so if D'Angelo Russell manages to get going on nights when LeBron or AD, if not both of them, are going, it opens things up for everybody if those guys are going. And Russell's the one, Reeves too, to a certain degree, because he can just knock down shots. But, diving into the numbers, and you're like, Russell's the one that scares me the most in terms of an X factor.
Yeah. He is a bucket getter. He's super smooth too. Like, he kind of plays like a little bit slow and at his pace. And sometimes you're like, this guy's unathletic, but all of a sudden he hits like 3 threes in your face.
Well, and he's a really big guard too, right?
Yeah.
Like he's not.
Yeah, and he's sneakily strong. Like you don't really think that he's gonna truck over somebody, but all of a sudden he's running past you, and then he's getting an N1. So he's a bucket getter. But the thing is, D'Angelo Russell is also a player that can be a negative.
Absolutely.
On the court.
And that's why they had to take him off the court last year.
And I think that's why you call him an X factor, because he
Yeah.
can win a game just as easily as he can lose a game for the Lakers. So it really is on these types of players to like bring their best every single game.
D'Angelo Russell be that? I think that's going to be the Lakers' question.
It's like how very telling.
How much can we play him, and how much, because if the Nuggets start picking on him, because the Lakers are going to pick on Jamal, because if you can get Jamal tired and have him exert extra energy on the defensive end to allow him, and then expect him to come on the offensive end and continue to produce, that's going to be a little troublesome for the Nuggets. But you can do the exact same thing to them. Like, how can you put pressure on the Lakers through D'Angelo Russell, putting him in like tough situations like you did last series?
Yeah, I think that you just keep going at him, right?
Yeah.
And you want to, because I think he is an X factor, and he's again can be kind of boneheaded. You want to get him in foul trouble and get him off the court, because then there's not that potential for him to go. Like Gabe Vincent isn't going to score as I go through their 15 games with them winning 12 to start that streak where they beat Atlanta. D'Angelo has 23, 27, 14, 29, 23, 6 in that first loss, 18, 25, 18, 28. And then in the 2 losses, 15 and 14, 4 in a win against Memphis.
So when he scores,
and then
well,
19,
they win.
and then 19 against the Pelicans. So his average is 16. But if he's going to get his average will go beyond it, get into the 20s, they're winning those games because LeBron and AD average 25 and change a game each. We know that you have to expect them to go for 30 in the playoffs just because the playoffs are going to play a couple more minutes and have everything run through them. So as you dive in there, I think you need to do all you can to just let D'Angelo Russell be the D'Angelo Russell of old and not this version that clearly is, I think, the X factor like we've identified.
I agree. For sure. He's a bucket getter. So all in all, I've got Nuggets in 6. You both have Nuggets in 5. I think more than anything, besides the fact that I would love to see the Nuggets go win another championship, because that's obviously the end goal here.
Parades are awesome.
They are so awesome.
Rings are cool.
Had a great
Parades are
time.
awesome.
They're super awesome. Besides all of that, I would love to just continue to shut down the Laker trolls and the delusion that spews constantly all over my Twitter /X. So it doesn't feel appropriate to wrap up this first episode without trolling Lakers fans just a little bit, because
let me ask you, Liv, because that's certainly one of your many calling cards, but one that you have no problem hanging your hat on as someone who trolls the Lakers. For my money, the only other person in town that is right there with you, it's funny because his son, I think, might have won a title with the Lakers, but certainly was on the Lakers, is Coach George Karl, who has no problem certainly not only defending the Nuggets, and it's funny because, yes, he lives here, but he's coached a million teams and has associations with a lot of players. I love
following him on Twitter.
But George, especially with his guy Lakers Guru, has no problem just constantly going at him. And so that's got to feel like not your biggest competition in town. Be like, all right, this guy, we're
neck and neck.
We're brother and sister in arms.
We totally are.
Together trolling Lakers fans.
I have I'm starting to grow a little bit of an army when I go against some of these teams. But one of the tweets that I wanted to talk about a little bit because I guess I'm just having a hard time understanding. I got tweeted at, Nuggets win 1 championship. Now the fans think they're a dynasty. Crazy. Mind you, he couldn't spell crazy right.
How do you spell it? With a K?
There was a
Or
random
Y?
W where the A should have been.
Quasi?
So typo, but like
Quasi.
nonetheless, maybe slow down before you hit tweet. Here's what I would love to ask these people. How do they expect dynasties to start?
You have to win the first one.
You have
Yeah.
to win.
Right.
It starts somewhere, right?
People were quick to take the Chiefs' potential dynasty, which now qualifies based on the 3 and 4 years.
And say, slow
After the-
down,
yeah, like, well-
slow down. It's like, well, we got to start somewhere, so let's
Yeah.
start there. And I want to dive into just a little bit. This is to the Lakers trolls. They're to that response, in an immediate response to that tweet. We win 1 championship, whatever. Yes, we did, and that's not what we're hanging our hat on completely. It's the fact that it was a sweep, and not only was it a sweep, but you have not won a game in 8 straight games. So it has nothing to do with the fact that we're trolling the Lakers because we won a championship. No, we're trolling the Lakers because who's your daddy? The Denver Nuggets. There hasn't been a competition. And I keep seeing Bleacher Report. Also, shame on some of these media accounts who have taken Anthony Davis's quote from before the regular season started,
Oh, I
where he
know.
said, LeBron and I had some conversations and we're ready.
They're trying to
Mind
start
you,
the pot again.
he said that in September,
Yep.
okay, and then proceeded to get an ass whooping however many more times to have 8 straight losses to the Nuggets. So let's not resurface that like AD just said that and now, they're ready for the playoffs. No.
He meant we're ready for after the play-in game if we
Yeah.
happen to match up. Trust us. In the first round, I know it was Western Conference Finals last year, but we're ready.
I saw last night a major media account reposting that with a popcorn emoji. Like
I grabbed it
woo.
to use on KOA, and then I ended up
wow.
not using it. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to reference what it was. This is AD
Of
before the
course.
season. It hasn't worked out
It hasn't.
yet. The thing, too, about Lakers fans, and especially if you're from L.A., if you're from anywhere, I think you get a little more credit. Lakers fans from all over the world, just like the Cowboys, the Yankees, whatever, all these franchises that transcend their cities, the Bulls forever with Michael Jordan. Their fanship is based in a lot of winning, absolutely.
Of course.
But this version of the Lakers, led by LeBron, who's my favorite player that I've ever watched, and I, being older than you guys, got to watch Michael Jordan in his prime. Charles Barkley's my favorite person all time, and I loved him more than MJ, but I knew MJ was a better player. Kobe was phenomenal, and there's been plenty of great players. LeBron is my favorite to watch, even with the flopping that y'all hate. It just doesn't bother me as much. But
Yeah, the crybaby crap.
but the
we can't do it.
LeBron Lakers now AD, LeBron and AD Lakers, have won 1 title. It was in the bubble, which was both hard but also unique. When it's come to a regular season, and he's obviously not getting younger, that's it. That's all they have to show for it. So it's not like the Lakers were in
These
the
trolls
championship.
love to bring up championships they weren't even alive for. This guy that's tweeting at me, I know him. We've been friendly in the media space, like since I first joined this space. He's my age. Like half of the
he doesn't
banners
remember
you're
the
talking
Magic
about,
Johnson Lakers.
Yeah, half of the banners you're talking about, you weren't even alive for, which is fine. If you're
I
a
do
fan
that
of the
with Kansas
Lakers,
in 22 and 23 before the tournament even started, but I get it.
But the problem is, though, a lot of Lakers fans are just LeBron fans that will follow him to the next team if that's where he goes. If he were to pick up his stuff right now
Go to
and
Charlotte.
say, I'm going back home to Cleveland, they would follow him there and they would forget all about however many championships. So that's where I struggle with Lakers fans, because most of them are just LeBron fanboys that are just going to follow him wherever he is next and probably have his whole career, which is fine. If he's your favorite player, that's cool. But quit flexing. One other person tweeted at me today and said, there's no they don't own us. Denver doesn't own the Lakers because here's the all-time playoff record. It's like those were such different teams. Half of those games you're referring to, Jokic was not in the NBA, so I don't know why you're even bringing that up. They're not even the same teams.
The Lakers, as a franchise, like for a fan base, like it's easy to be a Lakers fan, and I've said this many times. For any new Laker fans or even just younger people, it's kind of like inheriting money. You've inherited all
You didn't
these.
do anything.
Totally. No, that's so
You've
true.
inherited all these championships. Same thing with Celtics fans. The same thing applies to them. You've won all these championships, but you haven't been alive to know the meaning of even the first one. That's why we're so high up right now. As like even if you've won like your first championship like Cleveland, for example, right? They waited so long to get one.
Well, and look at the Browns and the Indians, right?
Yeah.
They still haven't won. Like, that's a city that has been thirsting for championships since the 50s.
Those are the types of fans I respect. When you're still a fan of a franchise that has done nothing.
Look at, and the Lions obviously didn't win a Super Bowl, but you can feel they're trending up, right? Doesn't mean they're going to win a Super Bowl because there's still a team in Kansas City and a bunch of really good teams out there. But the Lions are trending up, and you can feel for that fan base if you've been a fan of any team. Yeah. That's what makes Avalanche fans kind of interesting. Hockey fans in general, we know, are their own breed. But a franchise shows up and wins a championship, like, that's pretty crazy.
It
and
is.
Look at Vegas, too, and the rules changed. But
that
to be
was
able
awesome,
to,
yeah.
But to be able to win it for a fan base that, we know the Raiders aren't getting one anytime soon. And
Right.
I know they love the Aces. But the long-suffering fans, which is what Nuggets fans were for 50 years.
That's why
Not
I'm
that
kind of like, just let us live our life. I mean,
Yeah.
my God, like, that's why when those types of tweets come my direction, oh, they win one championship and they think that they're the shit. Yeah, I do. Because that's never happened before. And it's a really cool thing that we didn't have a bunch of big-name stars hopping around to get to the Nuggets to try to win. This is a team that has been building, and they suffered a really brutal loss in 2020 in the bubble to this very team, and now we're here. So yeah, it's funny because flexing the dynasty does not hit the way you think it's hitting Lakers fans. It just doesn't, because
Well, there's no dynasty. You're flexing history, right?
Right, you're flexing history that LeBron wasn't a part. We're talking about right here. What have you done for me lately? That's what I would like to talk about. So, and if so help me God, if one more person mentions the in-season tournament banner that is hanging in that arena, I will scream.
I totally forgot about that, and I realize that happens in the
and
middle of
honestly,
football
Lakers
season,
fans, you should forget about it too. Forget about the in-season tournament. I don't care. First of all, the fact that there's a banner involved in that is a whole nother conversation for another day. But that's all I have.
Did they get a ring?
I think they did.
The banner, I get. Whatever franchise is going to put up, whatever.
That's kind of weird.
Division champs, whatever. Western Conference.
They got a
final.
cup. They got an NBA cup. I think they got a ring. I don't know.
That's weird.
Do you have the same interaction? I mean, because Liv seems to thrive on the on the discourse.
I mean, to a certain extent, I do, but this is how I see Lakers fans. Just even throughout history, is like, Nuggets as a franchise was kind of like the little brother, right?
Yeah.
Like the little,
especially to the Lakers with the way that they owned them in the playoffs.
yeah, like the little brother
We were
who's
nice.
like,
We didn't threaten anyone.
yeah, and so now we're all grown up, and
That's right.
Lakers are kind of mad that we finally beat them. Mm-hmm. Not just beat them, but like we embarrassed
handled
them.
them. Yeah.
And
like
so
it
now
was,
we're the younger brother. We've grown up. We're here, and the older brother is kind of like, oh god,
Not liking it.
They're not liking it.
Not liking it at
because
all.
now we finally beat y'all, and now the narrative has changed. How crazy is it that now the tables have turned where Lakers media is like, oh, should they be dodging the Nuggets?
Right,
Like, how
right.
crazy has one
we've-
championship in one season turned around the whole narrative of like, now we're the big brother, now we're the big dogs, and y'all are coming to our house. Let's see what happens.
Let's see. Right.
We're gonna give you another spanking.
Yeah. Woo! I love the sound of that. So two of us are Nuggets in 5. I am Nuggets in 6, and maybe that's just to protect my heart. It's one of those things where you're like, maybe I'll expect the worst, hope for the best. That is worst case scenario to me, is that it goes longer than 5 or 4. Honestly, I don't worry about this team. The Nuggets have proven all season long, minus losing the 1 seed, whatever.
They kind of coasted.
They
It's weird.
really just kind of were pacing themselves, doing what they do, and were still winning games. They were still defending home court. Their home court record is great. There's home court advantage here in their favor. I think the only thing at this point that I'm praying for is just healthy bodies all across the board for the Denver Nuggets. And I think if they can stay healthy,
I think so too.
we've got ourselves hopefully round 2 of the playoffs. But for now, this has been episode 1 of Hoops Your Daddy, the first basketball podcast here with Guerilla Sports. And I imagine, fellas, we'll be back to maybe react to what we see in game 1. Hopefully there's a lot of good things to talk about, but if there's bad things, we'll still talk about them. We'll still be here reacting and giving our input and repping the Denver Nuggets. So for Liv,
Ruben,
I'm BK.
we're out, and we will catch you post game 1, Nuggets, Lakers, very soon. See ya.